In today's video, we are joined by an immigration expert who's here to help answer your top Mexican residency questions. So from choosing the right path to residency to avoiding common mistakes, we're going to break it all down to make the residency process easier and less overwhelming for you. So in today's video, we are joined by Valeria, who is the owner of Servicios Legales de Merida. Valeria and her team actually helped me get residency here in Merida just 2 short months ago. And today she's here to share all her wisdom with you guys. So thanks for joining us, and
Thank
want to share a brief
for inviting me.
introduction.
I'm happy to be here.
You want to tell us a little bit about what you do here and your business?
Sure. So I have been doing this about 4 years ago. I started doing it as like an extra job, as a side job, while I was a corporate attorney. But since the pandemic, the company I work for closed, so now I started doing this full time. So, and thankfully it has been a great way to work, and I'm very happy to keep doing this as my job.
Cool. You ready to jump into some questions?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, cool. And to the audience out there, thanks for sending in your questions. We're going to be addressing a lot of them. But for the first one, let's start by describing the different residency options. So temporary versus permanent, and explain kind of who they are for.
Okay. Yes. So like Gordon said, we have the 2 options, temporary residency and permanent residency. Keep in mind that they are directly like intertwined, because as soon as you get the temporary, you are already on your path for permanent. So yes, basically they have the same benefits, except the duration of your ID, so the expiration of the ID. So when you have the temporary, obviously your residency ID has an expiration date and you have to renew it. Once you get the permanent, that doesn't have an expiration date, so as long as you keep the card in good condition, you can keep that with you. There are some cases where people can access permanent directly without going through the temporary, but it will depend on if you have like Mexican citizen children, if you are married with a Mexican citizen for 2 years, and if you meet the income requirements at a consulate. But it's up to the criteria of the consulate. So some consulates, even if you meet the income requirement, they only give you the temporary because you are not retired yet. So my advice is to just check with the consulate first to see if it's possible for you to apply for permanent directly.
I think from what's unique about the consulates in the US too for the permanent is that there's no like defined retirement age, right? So that makes things very complicated. So definitely reach out to the consulate that you plan on applying to see whether or not you are eligible for permanent, if that's the route that you think you want to go. So the next question is, what are the most common ways to get residency? And here we're thinking about financial solvency, regularization or R&E, and also family unity. So how do you kind of describe those as different processes to get residency?
Yes, so I would say the most common ways currently are the financial solvency and the regularization. The regularization has been used by a lot of people lately because it allows you to gain residency without showing any income, just your previous entries to Mexico. So I would say currently that is the most popular way, but also we still get a lot of people that do the process, the usual process that has been going on for many years, which is applying at a consulate with your income through financial solvency. So, and also the family unity. The family unity can be done in the consulate or also in Mexico. So that is important to consider. In the consulate, they will ask you to show extra income for each family member that you add to your application. And the main difference is that if you do the family unity in Mexico, they don't ask you to show any extra income. So in the case of families, I always suggest, if you have the chance to apply once you're here in Mexico for your family, probably it would be a lot easier. And we have had many cases like that where one family member applies through financial solvency, and once all the family is here in Mexico, they do the rest of the family unity for their spouse or children.
Yeah. And just for the family unity, that's actually what Aimara and I are doing. So I got my residency, the temporary residency through financial solvency, and Aimara did not apply. For her, the reason was that she's working on getting her US citizenship, so we didn't want to kind of complicate the situation with getting two residencies. So I will be able to apply for her through family unity, even though I'm just a temporary resident. And as a follow-up to that question, in which cases would you recommend each residency type to your clients?
Yes, so obviously I would recommend applying to at a consulate with your financial solvency if you meet the requirement. That is very important. Some people meet the requirements but want to apply for the regularization. In that case, I mostly suggest that you go through the usual route, which is applying at a consulate, because with the regularization, there are some things that you have to keep in mind. Generally, it seems very easy, and it is sometimes easier than the consulate, but there are requirements as well for the regularization. One is that you need to have an entry to Mexico between 2015 2023. And the second one, which is where it gets most complicated, is that you need to let your current tourist visa expire. For example, if you enter right now to Mexico and you get a 6 months visa, you need to wait those 6 months in Mexico until the visa expires to be able to apply. This is where mostly, in most cases, people are not able to stay for that long in Mexico yet. So in those cases, I suggest if you meet the income requirement, just go and apply at the consulate, because that way you don't have to wait those months. You are not attached to a visa that you need to be waiting for the expiration. And also this regularization, I always suggest it as a plan B, because it's not something that has been going on for many years in the immigration law, so we don't know if next year is something that is going to continue.
And I think for the family unity as well, like, could there also be reasons for like a couple to prioritize that because of the different requirements in the consulates, the different financial requirements? So for example, as far as I understand, some consulates make couples apply differently, so two different appointments. So you each kind of have to have your financial solvency requirements met. And some of them treat them as dependents, where you just have to add a little bit of extra income or savings and investments for that dependent. But for example, in the case where they do have to have like two separate applications, almost, it like doubles the financial solvency requirements.
Yes.
And then family unity could then make more sense, because you can just have one person get it, and then once you move down to Mexico, you can apply for your spouse or dependent child or whatever.
Yes, also I have seen cases where, like you said, they ask for double the amount for each family member. In most cases, they ask around 1,000 USD extra for each family member. But lately, I have seen that it gets more complicated with children. So, for example, if the applicant is a single mom and she brings her child, some immigration agents at the consulate, they are not accepting the applications of the children because the other parent is not there. Even if you bring like custody documents or a letter from the other parent, they are being more strict. So in those cases, I always recommend, if it's possible, to do it once you are in Mexico, because in here they don't ask you any of those documents. They understand that if you're traveling with your child with their passport, you have the custody, so you can get the family unity residency for them.
And is this a fair statement, if you don't meet the financial requirements at any consulate in the US, and their financial requirements differ quite a bit, that technically your only path to residency, if you're not married to a Mexican or have a resident, like a spouse or family member, the only path is then RNE, is that right?
That is correct. The only path would be like getting a job offer from Mexico, which is more complicated. and the RNE. So that's why a lot of people are applying for the regularization or RNE, because yes, they don't meet the income requirements, and there's easier path to apply for residency.
So this is a question that we're getting a lot from our audience, and it kind of ties in two of the previous questions, and that is that people are really eager to get their temporary visa now, even though they have no immediate plans to live or move in Mexico. It's almost like a pre-application for like moving to Mexico further down the line, maybe in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. What do you kind of recommend in that situation?
Okay, yes, this is a case that actually, I would say like 40% of my clients have been in this situation where they just come here first to get their first residency ID, and then they just come for their renewals while they are able to reach the permanent residency in 4 years. So yes, this is not something that is forbidden by the immigration law or anything like that. You can do it if you want to start building that temporary residency to get the permanent. But I would recommend to just, if you're working with an attorney or with a facilitator, just to ask them what tips would they give you to when it's time to do the process at the immigration office. Because currently I have seen that they are being more specific with the address that they put on your forms. So they will ask you some questions about that. If you put a hotel address, it's very easy for them to put the address on Google and just see that it's a hotel that you're staying in. And they are not liking that, because many people are using hotel addresses and they just come here for like 2 days and they just want to go back to their country. So yes, I would recommend to just be careful with that, because they don't like to that you use a hotel address, because they see that you're not staying here long term. So I would recommend people who have like a friend staying in town, or they have some family members that already live here, to be able to use those addresses so you don't have any issues when applying for the first residency or for the renewals while you find a long-term location.
And just to clarify for people who haven't really thought about this process yet, the reason that you would potentially want to do this is that the financial requirements for temporary residency is much, much lower than permanent, maybe like 4 or 5 times lower for the savings and investments or the income requirements. And also you don't really know what changes will happen once the new year comes. So theoretically, the financial requirements could increase every year because the minimum wage here in Mexico is increasing, and that's what the financial requirements are tied to. So that's why you see a lot of people interested in applying for the temporary now, even though they have no immediate plans to move.
Yes, that's correct. My clients that applied 2 years ago, they wouldn't be eligible now. Many of them, they wouldn't be eligible now for financial solvency. So they always tell me, I'm glad that I applied 2 years ago, and I just, even if they were not able to stay here permanently yet, now they are, and they don't have any issues with that because they already meet the financial requirement.
So the moral of the story, if you're interested in moving to Mexico, apply now. It might be easier than in the future.
Don't put a hotel address.
Yeah, don't put a hotel address. Guys, I know that getting a residency can feel overwhelming, but if you want all these tips that we're discussing today and more in a very easy to digest place, make sure to check out our 5-minute Mexican residency cheat sheet. You can get it in the pinned comment below or also in the description. So this cheat sheet goes through all the steps that you need to take to get your Mexican residency and kind of outlines everything you need to do to make it less overwhelming and less stressful. And it could also help you avoid costly mistakes. So if that sounds interesting to you, just head to the description or that top pinned comment and download your free copy. So the next question is digging a little bit deeper into applying as a couple, or even applying with other dependents, so underage children. So for the couples, we kind of touched on it. It's common to apply together through financial solvency, but then the exact financial requirements could differ based on the specific consulate that you're applying to. But how does it work when you're kind of applying with dependent children, which I think is defined as 18 and younger?
Yes. So, yes, like Gordon said, when you apply with children, they have to be under 18. So, yes, that is a question that I get a lot from my clients. A lot of people want to apply with their children, but they are over 18 years old. So in Mexico, the age for adults it's 18. So if they are over 18, they are considered adults, and they will have to apply independently for their residency. They are not able to apply anymore through family unity or as a dependent. So it's important to keep that in mind. And in the case of children under 18, you can bring them with you to your appointment at the consulate. Keep in mind that you need to complete an application for each family member. So they need their own application. And usually they ask you an amount of approximately 1,300 USD per family member that you add to your application. Also consider that if you are the only parent bringing the children, it's possible that they will ask you that the other parent has to be present too for the application. And they are quite strict with that requirement. So keep in mind as well that if for some reason they deny the application of the child because the other parent is not there, you still have a plan B of applying once in Mexico and do the family unity here, because that is not requirement when doing the process here. And also there is no financial requirement when you do a family unity procedure in Mexico.
Okay, and I think you just mentioned too, if you want to bring your parent, you can do that through family unity. Yes. And there's no, I guess, like age requirement for the parent?
Yes, that is correct. So once you are a Mexican resident, you have the right to bring your children under 18, your spouse, or your parents. So keep that in mind as well. There's no age limit when it comes to the parents. The main document that you need is your birth certificate to prove that they are related to you, and they will get the same status as you. For example, if you are already a permanent resident and you bring your parents, they will also gain permanent residency directly.
Okay. And just to kind of go back for the couples, just to kind of rehash what we said earlier, if the consulate that you're applying to does have very complicated financial solvency requirements where they might ask for double the amount, just remember that family unity is always an option and just one person can apply, and then you get your spouse the residency here in Mexico. You just need an apostilled marriage certificate.
Yes, that is very important. A lot of people don't know about the apostille, so that is an extra certification that you need to do for your US documents so they can be used in Mexico. So that is a mandatory requirement. So whether you're bringing a marriage certificate, birth certificates of your children, or your birth certificate if you want to bring your parents, it's important that all documents have the apostille. So that is done in the states at the Secretary of State of each state. For example, in the state where you got married, in the state where your children were born. It's very simple. It's a very simple process to do. It's just sometimes it requires a little bit of investigation. But yes, it's also not expensive. So I always suggest to have those documents ready before coming to Mexico.
What if your parents are international? So like Venezuela is where Aimara's from, her parents are Venezuelan. Do they need to have an apostille from Venezuela for the birth certificate,
yes,
for example?
So it's very important to check because the apostille is not for all countries.
Okay.
So they have like a convention, the international convention where many countries join. So those countries are the ones that have to get the apostille. So I suggest it's very easy to find the list. On Google, you can just search apostille convention, and it appears all the list of countries that need to do the apostille. In the cases of the countries that don't appear on the list, the process that applies is the legalization. So the legalization is done at the consulate, at the Mexican consulate in that country. So we have seen also those cases. And for example, Canada, it was the case of legalization, but recently they just joined the convention, so they are starting to do apostilles too. So for the Canadian citizens, also important to keep that in mind, that they will require now an apostille for that.
So a lot of people associate the role of an immigration facilitator with the canje process that happens here in Mexico. It's the final step of residency when you finally get your visa card. But immigration facilitators are actually a great service too, to help kind of pre-applying to even the Mexican consulate in the US. And actually we used Valeria too to kind of calm my nerves when I was nervous about what to expect during the interview process at the consulate in Miami. So if you kind of want to explain how you can also help with the non-canje part of residency.
Sure. So people can reach out to me even if they are still in their country. For example, in Gordon's case, they were in States. So yes, many people reach out to me before starting anything. I would suggest that if you can just book a consultation before you do any steps, so you can have an idea of how the entire process is going to go, and the steps that you need to take to do your canje in this case. Because there's a lot of things that you have to consider. Many people during their consultations ask me, like, sometimes they even ask me, which consulate do you recommend? I'm looking for this types of requirements. So yes, depending on their situation, I can advise which consulate I recommend them to apply, or if they have a certain consulate in mind, we just check the specific requirements and I advise them on what to do, which documents to bring. Also, I assist them with completing their applications, because it's a simple document, it's a simple form, but sometimes they have questions and what to answer there. So yes, I usually assist them with the entire process of before their appointments. And also another important thing to keep in mind, once they have their visa, what to do next. So many people, they go along without any advice to their appointments. Thankfully, they get their visas, but later they don't know what to do at the airport, or which documents to show to do the canje. So in those cases, we assist as well.
I think a very important piece of like knowing which consulate to apply to is that it gets super confusing, and each one kind of has their own rules for the financial solvency requirements and also how to present the documents. So if you're not eligible at one consulate that's kind of closer to where you live, you could be eligible to one in a different state. And a lot of them do accept out of area or out of state applications. So it could be super helpful to talk to an expert and who can guide you kind of to the right consulate to actually help you get approved for residency. So that's a big help for sure. And this is also a very popular question. Is there anything a facilitator can do if you don't meet the financial requirements to apply through financial solvency?
Yes, so it's a question that I receive a lot as well. So in the case of facilitators or attorneys, we do our best to guide you in the path that would be more beneficial for you to gain residency. In the case of people that don't meet the financial requirements, their next option would be the regularization process. So keep in mind that for the regularization, you need to have an entry in between the years 2015, 2023. Those are the current requirements. The entries have to be by plane at an airport or by land. They are not allowed to be by cruise or by sea. So keep in mind that cruise entries don't count for this option. You need to have entered by land or by plane. And if you enter by land, very important that you see that you have a stamp on your passport. It's very common that sometimes people enter with their cards and they don't receive even like any stamps. So it's important to check your passport, check that their stamps are there so you can see if you are eligible for this option. And also remember that for the regularization, you need to have an expired visa. So when you enter, you need to let that visa expired, you need to stay in Mexico until the expiration of that visa to apply.
Yeah, so you have to be in the Mexican immigration system to be able to apply, right? So if you entered in for some reason, as she's mentioning, like you don't get the land border stamp, you just pass in by car, or you visited, we get a lot of this too, like people visited 30 years ago and never got a stamp, but that doesn't count because you're not in the Mexican immigration system.
Actually, that's why we say between 2015, starting 2015, because usually that's when the immigration office started their digital system, so they are able to confirm on their system if your entry appears. So that's why we say 2015, because usually all their entries like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they don't appear on their system, so there's no way for them to confirm that you in fact entered the country.
Yeah, and I think if you're not eligible for regularization or R&E, the only other option would be to look for a consulate that has the financial requirements where it kind of meets your needs. So they are quite different, but it's not guaranteed, obviously, because you have to meet the requirements. Do you have to have a facilitator in the city that you plan to move to? So this is another question that we're getting a lot. And I understand that it can be confusing because a lot of the advice on the internet is that you have to hire a facilitator in the city that you plan to move to. So for our example, it would be Merida. But then I think for this, like keep in mind that a facilitator can help with like two different parts of the residency process. So I don't know if you kind of want to expand.
Yes, so keep in mind that as attorneys, we can advise you on which path to choose for residency, if one is more beneficial for you. So the process at the consulate is mostly the same for people all over Mexico. So us as attorneys, we can explain to you, even if you are not planning to move to Merida, like in my case, I have assisted many people that are planning to move to other states in Mexico, but they just want to know what to do first or what would be their first step. So in that case, I can advise you to. But when it comes to the second part, which is for the canje, or for any process that has to be done directly at the immigration office in the state that you are in, I do recommend that you get a facilitator or an attorney that is based on that state, because the immigration office has also their rules that may vary depending on the location. So the rules that are for Merida that are very specific, they are not the same for Cancun, for example, for other cities. So I do recommend that you get a facilitator or an attorney that is has experience with that immigration office, so they can guide you and you don't have any issues with your paperwork there.
I think part of this, why this question is so popular too, because a lot of people out there are pretty similar to Aimara and I, in the sense that we're here in Merida now for 6 months, but we have no like long-term plans necessarily to like live here. So people are confused about kind of how to interpret that rule of if you have to apply in the state where you plan to live. So I think the only thing to think about then is like it's fine to apply in any state, but then when you move, in theory, you have to do a change of address. So obviously your address is in the immigration database, and my Visa card says issued in the Yucatan, for example. So in theory, when you move to a different state and have a different address, you do have to process that through the immigration system or a local INM office.
Yes, that is correct. So if for some reason, which is the case of many of my clients, they first come to Merida to apply, and then they decide that they want to move to Oaxaca or Jalisco, to any other state. In that case, it's important that you update your address at the immigration office that you're moving into. So if you are first coming and do your canje in Merida or your first residency application, that doesn't mean that you have to be living here, like Gordon said, the entire time. You can move, or even I would recommend if you move, even if you are still in the same city but you move to a different house, you still have to update your address at the immigration office. So keep that in mind. You have 90 days, 3 months to do your address update. whether you move to a different house or to a different state within Mexico.
Do they print you a new card, or they just do it in the system?
No, that is only in the system.
Okay.
Also, keep in mind, because some people, I have clients that they live in Cancun now, but they just, when they got their cards, they got it from Yucatan. So they always ask me, how can I get the discounts for the attractions in Cancun? Yeah. So keep that in mind. Your IDs will say, when you first get your residency, it will say the name of the state where you got it printed. But if for some reason you change your address and you do your renewal in other states, they will print a new ID and it will say the new name of the state. So that's why it's important to keep your address updated. Also, if you don't update it, you can receive a penalty, and you won't be able to do your process at the immigration office that you are now living in the state, because they will ask you that you first have to do the address update. So keep that in mind.
In what situation would they kind of know that you're not living in the state? Is it at the airport, or like when would they kind of find out that you're not, that your address doesn't align to where you're actually living?
Yes, so it's really rare that they do it, but in some cases, if they see that they, for example, you go and renew and they start asking you questions about where do you live, can you tell me the street number, the area, and you don't know what to say. In those cases, they can tell you that they will send a verification to your home. So they send an immigration agent to see if you are in fact living in that address that they have on their system. So yes, that's why I always suggest you keep it updated. And also for some paperwork, for example, if you're getting your driver's license, or if you are registering a car in Mexico, they will ask the immigration office to confirm your address. So if it doesn't match, they will ask you that you need to update it first.
Mm-hmm. So what can people expect after getting their residency permit in the US?
So once they get their visa or residency permit, it's very important to consider that that visa is valid for 6 months. So they have 6 months to come to Mexico and complete the process. It's very important to consider that when you start requesting an appointment at a consulate. Keep that in mind that after your appointment, you will have 6 months to enter Mexico. If for some reason that visa expires, you have to start the process all over again at the Mexican consulate. And in the case that you already have the visa in your passport, and you are coming between those 6 months, it's important to consider that once you enter, you have 30 days to reach out to any immigration office and start the canje process. So in the case that you're working with a facilitator, I would recommend to let them know before you are coming here, because right now we can book the appointments online. So we can book the appointments right after you arrive to Mexico to make your process quicker.
Yeah, I think a great thing with that facilitators are able to book appointments at the INM office here is that you can kind of plan your logistics around that. Because if you're just traveling as an individual, you can only really make an appointment, or they tell you about the appointment after you enter the country, and then it could be weeks potentially in Mexico before you can actually attend an appointment. So it could just be a very long stay in Mexico that you weren't originally planning for. So it's great to have a facilitator to be able to book that for you, and then once you have a date, you plan your trip to Mexico around those dates.
Yes, we have seen many cases of people coming that they enter and want to do their canje, and they just show up at the immigration office thinking that they accept walk-ins. Keep in mind that at least in Merida, this is not the case. Everything has to be done through a previous appointment. So if you show up, they will tell you just have to enter online and book the appointment. And sometimes the website for appointments can be confusing because everything is in Spanish, and they ask you to complete some forms before showing you the calendar. So in that case, I do suggest asking a facilitator for assistance so they can help you with getting a quick appointment.
And one other quick tip about what to expect after you get your visa permit. once you enter Mexico for the first time with your visa permit stamp in your passport, you really have to tell the immigration officer that you are entering for canje, right?
Yes, that's correct. If you enter at an airport that has automatic kiosk to scan your own passport, I suggest to avoid those because those are only for tourists. They will give you a tourist visa automatically. So you always have to do the line at immigration and go with an immigration agent in person to be able to show them the page where the Mexico visa is, so they don't mistake you as a tourist.
Because if you don't get stamped in like canje, in theory, it can terminate your application. Is that right? Or it really complicates things?
Yes, it doesn't terminate the application, but when you go to the immigration office, if they see that you were marked as tourists, they will have to request a correction of their system, and it can take weeks. So yes, that delays the process a lot.
Okay. The next question, is it required to use an immigration facilitator for your INM appointments or for canje?
Okay, so it is not mandatory. However, I have seen many people struggle with going to the immigration office, understanding, obviously, everything is in Spanish. So a lot of people don't understand what are the requirements, what form they need to complete, what they need to put in the forms. So keep in mind that now with the new website they have, you have to complete a form before requesting an appointment. You cannot book an appointment without that form. So that I do recommend that you use an immigration facilitator to be able to get your appointment without any mistakes.
I think throughout this entire process too, it's mostly or exclusively in Spanish, right? All of the forms, there's no option to translate it. And even for us as a couple, Aimara is a native Spanish speaker, but we still went with an immigration facilitator, and it made everything so much easier because we didn't want to run into the problem of having any kind of error on our documents or whatever, and then go to the INM and then get sent back and just kind of deal with that more bureaucratic process, because it is like a government office, and you know, if something's not how it has to be, then you have to fix it. And if you have to fix it at the office, the person might not speak English, you know, so you can deal with that problem, or they just send you out if it's a very busy office potentially to like reapply.
Or they just tell you that you have to book another appointment, which delays the process a lot.
So what are the most common mistakes that you see people make during the residency process?
Yes, so I would say one of the most common mistakes is at first when they are entering to do their canje, they don't show the page where the Mexico visa is. They just show the passport, so the immigration agents, they just see the passport and think they are coming in as tourists. So it's very important to keep that in mind, that you need to show the visa. Another mistake that I have seen is that people, they just want to come and do an immigration procedure, whether it's the canje, the regularization, the family unity, in just one day and then leave Mexico. So I always suggest to consider that you have to be here for a couple of weeks to do any procedure, at least a week when it comes to quick procedures like canje, because we never know when the immigration office is going to have issues with printing IDs. Sometimes their system is down, or people, also another mistake is that people don't check the Mexican holidays before coming in. So yes, keep that in mind, that you need to check the calendar because the immigration office will close on some days. But mostly I would recommend to just consider to stay at least a week in Mexico to be able to finish your canje without any issues or any immigration procedure. With the regularization, also another common mistake is that people, they don't consider that they need to let their visa expire. Some people are not, or they are being informed like incorrectly with the procedures, so they think they just can come and do it and go back to their country. Each procedure has their requirements and their timing, so I would suggest to just be patient with the procedure so you can complete it without having any issues.
So what are some red flags that people should look out for when hiring an immigration facilitator?
Okay, so some red flags would be if they tell you that the process can be done in 1 day and that you will receive your card on the same day, it's something that usually it is done. The immigration agents try to do it on the same day, but it's not guaranteed. So yes, if they try to tell you that something is like way easier, like you just show up, they will give it to you on the same day, especially if you're not staying in the same state. A lot of people come from other states to Merida, for example, and try to get their card and later leave. Or they tell you as well, obviously the fees. So if they don't tell you like the government fees, the exact amounts, also that can be a red flag. Or if they tell you that they will do your immigration procedure for like I don't know, 1,000 USD or some like big amount of money, keep in mind that us as attorneys and facilitators, our work is we have our fees. So mostly all companies have the same type of prices that we do. So I would suggest to ask first a couple of different options to be able to see if what the prices are giving you, if they are fair. And also very important, the online reviews. So another red flag is that if you look at some facilitator's name or their website, their Facebook page, and you see a lot of complaints from people, obviously that is not a good sign. So yes, and also, at least in the case of Merida, the people that have a lot of complaints by their clients, the immigration agents know about this too. So if you choose that facilitator, it's very likely that you will have issues even with the immigration agents, because when we fill out the forms, we put our information as facilitators so they know that you are our client. So if they have any questions, they can reach out to us. So if they see some names that they don't like in your application, they can start asking you more questions, they can start asking you more paperwork, and it's possible that your process could be more difficult than it should be just because of the facilitator you chose. So it's very important to look for reviews online. Very, very important to see if the people that use that service are happy with their work.
So now we're moving to after the residency process. What other things do people have to keep in mind when dealing with immigration type topics?
Yes, so once you have your residency, I would say the most important procedures that you have to keep in mind are your address updates and your renewals. So the address updates, consider that you have 3 months after any change to update the immigration office. And the renewals, very important to keep in mind the expiration date on your cards, because a lot of people get confused with the dates. So in Mexico, we have the first the date, second the month, and third the year. So keep that in mind so you don't miss your expiration date. And the expiration date of your ID, 1 month before that date, you can do any renewal. Or if you already have the 4 years and you are changing to permanent, keep in mind that you have that month before the expiration date to do any procedure. It's important to not let the card expire. Everything has to be done before the expiration date.
And then for the address change, it's true that people don't necessarily have to attend the INN office? Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. So with the address update, many people ask me like, will they print a new ID or something like that? In that case, that is not the case. They will only update your information on their inside system. So in the case of our clients, we do the whole process for them. They don't have to be there in person. We just need their documents and we complete the forms. We do the address update for them. And with that is enough. It's a very simple process for the immigration office. So they just update your information on their system and you don't have to go in person if you hire a facilitator.
And one final very important thing that often gets overlooked is how you enter and exit Mexico the right way once you do become an official resident.
Yes, so once you are a resident, very important to consider that you need to always have your residency ID with your passport. A common mistake that I see a lot as well is that when people are coming back to Mexico as residents, they just forget to show their card, so they just give their passport first, so the immigration agents, they don't have a way to guess or see if you are a resident if you don't show your card. So once they scan your passport, they will automatically put you as a tourist if they don't see any other document. So it's very important that you give both at the same time, your passport and residency ID, so they don't make any mistakes. And when exiting Mexico, so every time you leave Mexico, you have to locate the immigration office at the airport. Here in Merida, they have one, and they just install a new one right by the gates before boarding. So when you enter, you will just see it right away. And in there, you just have to go with the agent, show them your residency card, tell them that you're leaving Mexico, and they will just put it on their system. I would recommend that the most important part is especially when coming back to Mexico. So some people for some reason forget to go to the immigration office at the airport when leaving, and they get really concerned. In those cases, there's not like any issue that will come up for you as a resident if you forget to do that step. But the crucial part is when entering Mexico. So because that is when, if you make some mistake, the residency can be canceled. And also, if you enter as a resident, keep in mind as well that you don't, I recommend not using those automatic kiosks, because those are only for tourists. So you always have to go with an agent in person to be able to show them your ID.
Wow. So it can be taken away from you? Like cancel, just give
Yes,
it your...
if you scan it as a tourist, yes, it will be canceled.
Okay.
So that's the end of our questions. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks to everyone for sending in your questions. We hope we addressed them. And Valeria, if you want to share the best way for people to contact you so you guys can get in touch with her expertise.
Sure. So you can send me a WhatsApp. So I think you will put my number right there. You can send me a WhatsApp or an email as well. We also have a Facebook page, Servicios Legales de Merida. And you can also find us on Google, practically anywhere, with Servicios Legales de Merida, and we'll be happy to help you.
So we'll put all that contact information in the video description as well. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment or just email me if you have any questions. And remember, there is a cheat sheet that you can download in the top pinned comment and also in the description. And thank you all for watching. Hope this was helpful.
Okay.
Gracias.